This week's Mind Espresso is about letting go of thinking and being able to let go and have the humility and the confidence to let go. We're going to explore the book Think Again by Adam Grant and not look at the whole book, but just a couple of concepts in here that really struck home for me as someone who has constantly worked with executives about trying to rethink the landscape. Now, any preconception or opinion you have is based on a set of assumptions. The problem in the world that we live in now is those assumptions are changing constantly. And so if they're changing constantly, can our thinking adapt at the right level? Can it move in pace with the change of thinking? Does it move ahead? Is it stuck in the past? Real challenges, because the underpinnings of everything we do can change very quickly in this environment. Now, a couple of things that he found that struck me. Number one, clever people tend to be closed-minded people. Why? Because they believe they're clever enough, right? I used to say, I'm just smart enough to be dumb, right? I've got enough intelligence to make myself dumb by believing that I'm clever rather than believing that I'm exploring something that at its basis is a hypothesis, which is really all thinking, right? And all thinking could change based upon what the assumptions are underneath that. So the opposite of clever is humility. And one of the other things he found is that people who have humility have less anxiety. Why? Because if you think you're really clever, then you tend to want the world to be a certain way. And it creates a lot of anxiety when the world isn't the way you think it is. When you have humility, you understand that the world is never going to be exactly the way you think it is. And even if you were the smartest person in the world, you'd have it wrong, right? Because no one has it right, because there's so much information and so many assumptions out there that will never get this perfectly right. Now, the other thing that was in there that really caught my eye was this idea of conflict of thought and personalities. And a lot of times people take a conflict of thought personally, right? And one of the 4 agreements that we covered in a previous Mind Espresso, and by the way, one that Tom Brady holds to, is don't ever take things personally, right? Nothing is personal. And especially when it comes to ideas, right? We mix up this conflict of thought versus conflict of relationship. We believe if someone doesn't agree with us, that somehow means our relationship is bad. We got to get over it, right? Because conflict of thought is constant, especially if the world is changing. And Adam believes that we need to end up in this place of confident humility, where we have humility, but we don't let that humility turn into this undermining of our own confidence, right? We have confidence, but we have the flexibility, and it really plays off the whole growth mindset concept that we've covered in a previous Mind Espresso. Now, to get there, he believes we need to have detachment. Detachment for the past and the present. So a lot of people get caught up in the way things were and think, gee, it used to be this way. Well, yeah, but that's an anchoring bias, right? And there are 13 cognitive biases that Daniel Kahneman detailed in Thinking Fast and Slow that really point to this idea that we're really trained and we're programmed to not give up our ideas. In fact, one Stanford researcher found that we have a mental delete button. And I know I talked about this before, but that mental delete button eliminates things that don't fit into our pattern. And Adam Grant explored one study of mathematicians who were great at pattern finding until the patterns that they found didn't agree with the way they thought their solution should go. So we're very good at deleting the stuff that doesn't align with our past. So we need to have detachment between the past and the present, but also from our opinion versus our identity. There are so many people who believe that their opinion is closely identified with themselves, right? And if my opinion is wrong, then I'm wrong. If my opinion is wrong, then I'm bad. We need to let go. And humility is all about understanding that we will never have a full comprehension of any problem we're trying to solve. We can have confidence based upon our past, that we can make the right decisions based upon the right inputs, but we also have to have the humility to understand and the self-awareness to know where the thinking that we've had to this point may not be the thinking that we need to go forward. And it's really, really hard. So now I'm going to go from Adam Grant back to Daniel Kahneman. And Daniel Kahneman is famous for saying he doesn't really have hope for us as humans. To individually do this, he doesn't have a lot of hope for us because we have so many cognitive biases. What he does believe is that we can set up processes that involve multiple people in multiple circumstances that will allow us to evaluate our thinking. And one of the best frameworks I've ever come across is assumption thinking. And that assumption thinking is, what do I assume about this problem and how would those assumptions change? And the other one that I really love is an old Mike Royko, which is wonder, think, know. What do I absolutely know? what do I think? And what's kind of a wild guess? What do I wonder about? And if you take anything that you're trying to solve for and you look at it through the lens of wonder, think, know, it gives you insight into what you don't know. And so how do we become, in Adam's mind, much more of a scientist and less of a preacher or a politician or someone who's trying to put forth an agenda, and become someone who can dispassionately look at a problem, detach themselves from the past, detach themselves from their own identity, and then come to a conclusion about where we need to go. And that is this week's Mind Espresso.